Hello, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's presentation on special interest exploration as a career foundation. My name is Maisie and I will be your presenter this afternoon. I am proudly autistic with sensory processing disorder as well as learning challenges. It's something that I have many examples through my own lived experiences. And this topic is very, very important to me because I have worked with autistic individuals of all ages for about 30 years now. So I started when I was in school working as a behavioral therapist, and then I moved on to become a relationship-based parent and family coach. And in 2019, I started Autism Career Pathways because my little clients grew up. And through years of partnership and watching them work so hard with their parents to really develop skills and to be able to gain independence and overcome many, many things, finding a meaningful employment where they can maintain and grow within their workplace, it's still a really, really tough journey. So that's why in 2019, I started Autism Career Pathways to really help figure out how we can better educate our community and also empower businesses to identify their own inclusivity culture. So that's what Autism Career Pathways is all about. Okay, so a little bit more about Autism Career Pathways' mission is to show the world that every autistic person or divergent person has important stories to share with the world, and our nonprofit is here to help share those important stories. And how we want to do that is to create a customizable hiring and onboarding resource for all types of businesses. I am very passionate to figure out how we can empower small businesses in our community, our local bakeries, secondhand bookstores, our printing companies, all these businesses in our community to be able to create a space for neurodivergent people and autistic freelancers to be able to help their businesses to also thrive better. We also want to build an online platform to provide special interest-based self-discovery tools for career exploration. So in my experience working with autistic individuals, if we only address goals and define progress based on neurotypical standards, that's really a tall order. And this is also why getting a job and sustaining a job is very, very difficult for neurodivergent job seekers. So the way to undo that is to really help neurodivergent individuals to really embrace who they are, strength, and also challenges, and help them to be able to self-advocate better in the real world. We also want to empower businesses to create their own inclusivity culture. We can't really tell businesses what to do and how to accommodate, but with education, with also partnering with businesses, each place can be more neurodivergent, welcoming in their own ways, and every workplace is a little bit different, and ACP want to be able to help each business figure that out. We also love to host engaging autistic-led events for community education. This year, we hosted an Autistic Makers live events with a few celebrities. And right now we have Autistic Makers holiday boutiques where we spotlight just beautiful, unique creations, art creations, and merchandise from all over the world. So if you want to check that out, you can head over to @Autism Career Pathways on Instagram and be able to check out and be able to support Autistic Makers. Okay, so this first slide is to help everyone to rethink autism or neurodivergence as a neurotype. So what I mean by this is that autism being diagnosed as autistic doesn't mean that you are a lesser version or you have a lesser version of a mind. It just means that you're functioning differently. So an example of this would be if you have an Apple phone, some people have an Apple phone, some people have a Samsung phone. It has the same functions, but you really need two different manuals to be able to properly use your phone, right? So the problem with being able to help people to be successful at work or at school is that we don't have the right kind of manual to support neurodivergent people. So I hope that today's presentation will help everyone to put on a different lens. So the other way that you can think of being autistic or having ADHD, as well as different kinds of neurological diagnosis, is that our mind is built differently. So because our mind is built differently, then we also need different kinds of accommodation. We have our own language. Everything is different, right? So if you are autistic, definitely we have a different sensory processing system. So what it means that the way we process stimuli, things that we see, things we smell, things we hear, things we feel, it's all calibrated differently. So we have a different sensory processing filter. So for me, I'm I'm hypersensitive to brightness, smell, also tactile feel. It's challenging for me to be able to function properly, actually, when I'm exposed to all these stimuli all at once. And, when you're outside or with a lot of other people, or when I was in school, I get into sensory overload very, very quickly and actually have very adverse reactions to when I'm feeling sensory overload. So a different sensory processing system, right? And everyone has a sensory profile, so everyone reacts to sensory stimuli differently, but specifically to autistic people, our sensory profile is really either hyposensitive or hypersensitive. And how we live our life is really, it depends, is closely related to our sensory differences. And because of our sensory differences, it also affects our ability to process information. So you think about when somebody's talking to you, it's input into your brain, but then you have to process the information and organize the information to be able to respond, whether you respond verbally or non-verbally using your body language. You have to be able to have that flow of input into processing and then eventually into output. Right? So it's a different information processing system. So that's why I think expecting neurodivergent people to be able to perform accordingly to neurotypical standards, it's often very, very difficult because our ability to have consistent output is really different. Depends on how much bandwidth we have in the moment. It depends on sensory stimuli, the complexity of information and instructions. There's so much going on. And a lot of times it's very, very difficult for us to be able to provide the output expected. So that I just explained the unique ways to process input and generate output. So a lot of times, for example, when I'm outside and I'm focusing so much to be able to find my way and not get lost, for example, if someone were to call my name, I probably wouldn't catch that until much, much later. A lot of times our ability to process information is much, much slower than what a neurotypical person would be able to just have that nice flow of like free-flowing information, and they're able to quickly respond the right way, right? And for us, it's different. There's always something blocking that information pathway. So you can also think about it as a highway that has a lot of traffic jams. So like some parts are moving, but most parts are moving very slowly, or some parts are not moving at all, right? So if that's the scenario, then it's very, very hard to get to where you're supposed or where you want to get to. So that's a good visual. Autistic people are not self-centered. We are actually interest-centered. So this is Harry Thompson, who is a great autistic advocate he's based in UK. He talks about that, and I completely agree. We connect with others based on a specialized interest. Now, some people say special interest, some people say specialized interest. So in this presentation, I'm going to refer to both, and I'm going to talk more about special interest in a bit. Okay, so I hope now you can rethink autism or neurodivergence in a different way. It's a neurotype. It's not a deficit model, okay, or it's not a neurological deficit. So please keep that in mind. So what is autistic specialized interest or special interest? So this is my own way of defining it. It's a meaningful, enduring, sophisticated, comprehensive, and dedicated passion towards certain things or topics, right? So an example for this would be my longest time special interest is my love of sports watching, not sports doing, sports watching. It's something that my father introduced to me when I was a little girl, because I think he was trying to find ways to connect with me. And I was very, very quiet as a little girl. I was one of those toddlers that when you put me in the playpen and just throw some objects in there, I would just sit there quietly fiddling with the objects. I was the easy, quiet little girl, and I was the good girl, basically, easy to take care of, and more compliant and people-pleasing type, right? So my father introduced me by just inviting me to sit on his lap and watch Muhammad Ali, because obviously he loved sports. He loved tennis, boxing, soccer, and I grew up in Asia. Badminton was very big, and I am still interested in that. So just over the years, my love of sports in general actually gave me a template, a formula to be able to understand that humans back and forth. Because when you think about it, in every sports, there is that underlying patterns of that back and forth. It doesn't matter what type of sport it is, even though sometimes it's individual sports versus group sports. There's a lot of things that I can watch and unpack and deconstruct. And that really helps me actually to understand human behaviors and human communication in general, right? So that's an example of special interest. It's really usually deeply rooted and it stays with us. That's how you know it's different than a hobby. Another example would be, I know a little too much about my NBA basketball team, for example. I know what my players, what kind of snack they like, and I know their pregame habits. I know a little too much according to my family members, but it's something that gives me joy and it gives me something to look forward to at the end of the day. I also tend to schedule my work around my sports watching activities. So that's an example of special interest and how it's a little bit different than just hobbies, right? And this topic is also how I tend to info dump. If you allow me to info dump, that's where I would go to. Okay, so that's my own specialized interest, and I hope that helps you to understand that how different it is than hobbies. Do you have any special interests? If you do, you can write it in the comment and I will read it later. Okay, so myths about autistic special interests. Myths means things that are not true, right? Number one, we don't have to be able to physically participate in that special interest activity. Like for me, I'm not athletic at all, and I don't actually play sports. I should exercise more for sure, but it's two different things. So a lot of times with autistic teens, for example, and just because they still love to collect like stuffed animals or walk around the house with, soft blankets and so on. And then, other family members might say, oh, you're too old for that, so don't do that anymore, and so on. Why do you still play with trains? You're like 20 years old now. Can you find another hobby? And so on, right? So one does not have to physically be able to participate in the activity in order to have and appreciate that special interest. Is it a solitary preference? No, not always, because like for me, I love talking about my knowledge of sports, for example, with people from all over the world. With the fathers that I work with, it doesn't matter if they're in China or they're in England. Everyone always has the sports that they're interested in, usually. And that really helps me to break the ice, right? So it's not necessarily a solitary preference. Sometimes I get to watch football with my husband, and I'm perfectly happy to do that. So it could be a shared experience as well. Is it intense and obsessive in nature? Yes, sometimes, because sometimes when we really need to have our own space, special interests really give us our own thing to do. I have clients who love to who have a bag of marbles, for example. And when my client gets stressed out, she would go to her room and just play with those marbles alone, and she preferred to be alone while doing that. So it's not necessarily intense and obsessive in nature. It may look like that to the outsiders, but it's not always like that. The interest remains unchanged. That's also a myth, because for me, definitely, even though it's still sports watching, as I got older, I definitely added other elements to it. For example, I know a lot about sports business. I listen to sports radio. So my vehicles to grow my knowledge about a particular sport, has definitely evolved. So usually special interests does evolve and change as we get older, although the theme is still the same. The interest has to be age appropriate. I already talked about this. It doesn't have to. It's really up to the person whether they want to share as a 30-year-old that I'm very, very interested in trains, for example. But we know a lot of autistic adults who are interested in trains, even though they're much, much older, right? So it doesn't have to be connected to how old you are at all. Does it have to lead to a career path? No, it doesn't. If it does, I think it's a great blessing. So for me, that sports watching has given me like a sense of familiarity when I struggle with understanding communication in general. But it's also why I think my other special interest is psychology and communication, learning just how people from different culture communicate. And for me, it has definitely led to me learning about psychology and designing curriculum and all that. So for me to have all these 30 years to pretty much more or less serve the same population and continue to enjoy it, that's really a huge blessing. But in most people, it doesn't have to be like that. You might be a great artist and you love doing that specific kind of art creation, but you might be an accountant as your day job. It doesn't have to be, right? But it definitely gives us something safe when we come home from work, and it's our own thing that would give us, like, refill our cup. Okay. So here are some examples of special interests. I know one of my followers who really, his special interest is mushrooms. He loves, if you follow him, he has a lot more followers than right then. I found him when he just got started, and I helped him found a lot more followers. So if you are interested in mushrooms, you can definitely find Dylan on Instagram. To the right is Anthony Schmidt, and he is right now maybe about 14, and his thing is he stage his metal cars, and he just takes pictures with his camera of his iPhone. And just the way he does it, he has such an incredible eye to make these stage cards just come to life. So check out he's on Instagram and also Facebook, on TikTok. And Anthony, because he's autistic, he has an incredible ability to hyperfocus. And he was able to combine his special interests in cars and photography. And because of his ability to hyperfocus on details, he's able to create this amazing photos. So he sells his print. So if you're shopping for gifts, definitely check out and support his merchandise. Okay, so the next one, this is Alex, a former client. So here I wanted to show you when he was younger, he really loves to group the same colored objects and make specific arrangements. I think you'll see here, these are glue sticks. He just walks around the house and collect, and it's always a little bit different. He loves the color orange and the color purple, but his ability to be able to organize things in a specific category has really helped him today. He is actually a proud owner of Big Al's Best, and what he sells is these delicious chocolate covered toffee. And he also does calligraphy. So Alex is one of those guys who, he understands the task, he will just keep going and he won't stop until the task is done. So he has incredible work ethic. And whatever work he happens to be doing, you'll see the way he organized his materials. He's very, very systematic. He's very neat. When you see him work, there is that progression. And I think it's a beautiful thing. He also works at the library. He volunteers at the library, at the community center, and the food pantry. And this is just a whole story of like me working with somebody since this person was very young, and be able to see how these particular special interests has really helped him to thrive and be able to contribute as a community member. I think it's beautiful. Okay, so special interest in animals. This is another one that's very, very common. To the left, you'll see me with this young man who, guess what is his special interest? He loves turtles, tortoises. And when I visited his home, he had about 30, 40 of them of all sizes. So I had a full, really eye-opening learning moments with him of like just where each type of tortoise live and their habitat and how to take care of them. And I just love how he came to life while he was taking me for a tour and so on. And he wanted to be able to sell, like open a pet shop, but just specializing in tortoises and tortoise food and about all the habitat. So I thought that was a really, really cool one. So a lot of autistic people love animals because the animals provide us with a way to correlate with us. So when we are dysregulated and when we interact with our pet, it helps us to kind of calm down. Also, I love also deep pressure. So having something heavy, like a heavy pet, like a big dog sitting on me, that would be helpful for me to be able to calm down as well. And of course, the fur, the feeling of the fur. Kat is a great autistic advocate from Australia. She's a great author and she had been featured on TV, and she's a certified dog massage therapist. I don't know if there's such a thing in America, maybe. So animal is a big time special interest for neurodivergent people. And hopefully now you can understand the reason behind it. Okay. So why do we nurture specialized interests? Let's think about the whys, right? The functions of special interests in neurodivergent people. Definitely it's something to be proud of because it's a knowledge that we want to continue to accumulate, if you want to say that. We love learning more and more about, I always learn something new about the sports world and athletes. I love it. It's something to be proud of. Funny story for me, when I became a U.S. citizen, I had to go through an interview process, and I happened to wear maybe, I think, a 49ers jersey, like a sweatshirt or something to my interview. And that started a conversation with the officer who interviewed me. And we just ended up talking about different national football teams. And I was very confident in it. And I was able to engage in a conversation and ask him questions and spit out different football teams names. And I think after about 10 minutes, he said, okay, Maisie, I think I don't have to ask you the rest of the questions. I think we would be happy to have you become a U.S. citizen. So that's a funny story. That was a true story. So definitely something to be proud of. Definitely conversation starters, a self-regulation reset when we're feeling like really out of sorts. It's a safe ritual for us. And when we need to do it on our own, it helps us to really regroup quicker. Something to look forward to, a way to build resilience, to push ourselves beyond comfort zone for sure. I know many autistic adults who love like a specific band. Like I know someone who loves BTS, which is a Korean K-pop band. And of course, going to a concert is very, very difficult for that person, but because of her love to that band, she would totally do it. It takes a lot of preparation for her to do it, but she would totally push herself to be able to make it to a BTS concert. That's an example, right? So a way for us to build resilience and work towards something, pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zone. It's also, of course, learning opportunities. When you're interested in a particular topic, you have access to it on YouTube, like different ways. It's always learning opportunities. It gives us a way to connect with others and also a shared experience opportunity with family members. That's also important. So its special interest gives us a way to meet halfway with family members as well as other people. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay. Keep in mind special interest activities can potentially fulfill sensory needs, exercise. So you happen to have a lot of energy and you like certain kind of movements, maybe dancing or running, then there you go. I know a few non-speaking autistic young adults who have become marathon runners, for example. One of them just completed the second Boston Marathon this year. So definitely it can potentially fulfill sensory needs depending on what it is. Can be perceived as a play or a leisure activity or downtime for autistic people. I think you guys can understand that as well. It's downtime for us, right? In whatever format, it's just downtime for us. And for parents and professionals working with neurodivergent people, please afford us that downtime with our special interests. It's very, very important. It should not be controlled or conditioned by others' expectations. This is an important point. So what I mean by this is like, because it's special interest, in order for us to continue to thrive on it and make it our own thing, special interest should never be bribed. So do not use bribe when it comes to special interests. It should just be ours. It should not be conditioned in any other ways, right? So an example would be an instruction like this. Like if you want to play with your trains, you have to do this first. When you know playing with trains is something that really helps this child to come to life and to just have a safe zone, right? So please don't do that. Please tell your therapeutic team not to do that anymore if your child has shown special interest in certain things, right? Don't touch it. Just leave it be. You can join as a partner if your autistic family members allow you, but you should not attach any rules to it, because then it becomes a performance base. It becomes static expectations, and it shouldn't be, okay? If that's the case, then it won't develop and evolve over time, and your autistic family member will just lose their passion. It's no fun anymore, right? Because it has been controlled by other people, okay? So special interests or specialized interests can be about a particular activity. So it could be like, I know someone who really loves maps and traveling. So his thing is just going to different airports, for example. So it's that activity of visiting different airports that is his special interest, basically, as much as he could, right? It could be a person or a character, maybe a historical character. It doesn't really matter. It could be a movie. It doesn't really matter. I'm sure you all have seen someone who just loves watching the same movie and over again. There is research, by the way, saying that preference to sameness actually soothes a dysregulated person. There's definitely research if you want to look that up. It could be specific movement, for example. I know some businesses that was built because the neurodivergent person has the same movement that the person does over and over again. I know an example of this would be artists, painters, where they do certain movements with their hands and they actually learn to generate beautiful art creations with paint, because that's their motoric preference to do that over and over again, right? So it could be topic, could be a theme, or it could be an object, right? Collectors, for example, like Alex with his orange things. Okay, so parent objectives. So if you are right now, if you have young children who are not yet showing you a particular theme for special interest, this is what I put together for you. Don't despair, because it takes a while for a young child to really figure out what gives them joy, and just be able to share that or communicate that. It takes time. So the best thing you can do if you are a parent of a young neurodivergent child is to make sure you have moments throughout the day where you let your child be. And just as long as the child is safe, you can then be a good detective and observer. If my child is just having a downtime, what does my child do? So release the need for autistic loved one to perform during a special interest activity. That's important, right? So let's say your child really loves cars. Actually, my brother really loved cars. Also, my nephew really loved cars. And if that person, say, is drawing cars, like my nephew would draw like very intricate sketches of cars when he was 2 years old, for example. So, a lot of parents, because they get a lot of therapeutic homework, you might get tempted to ask questions like, what are you drawing? Is the car big or small? What kind of car is it? So it becomes a test, right? So my nephew would not answer me if he just happens to be drawing his sketches. And if I intrude his space by asking him questions, he would definitely just go away. Don't bother me. This is an example of what I ask parents not to do, is to, when your child has developed a certain kind of interest very clearly, then don't turn it into something that your child has to perform for you or for your therapeutic team members. Just don't go there. Allow them, afford them their own time to enjoy it. Share parents' interests in an inviting way. Now, this is something a little bit different. I think it's important to share your interests as a person to your family, to your children in general, autistic or not, right? Neurodivergent or not. So my dad shared his interest in sports. And to this day, I remember fondly my time watching sports with my father, but he introduced that to me into my life, right? So you can do something the same too. Like you could, if you love to play golf, if you love cooking, if you love baking, definitely you should share that. You should invite your children, autistic or not, to be able to join you, right? It might start very, very simple. It might start with just sharing with them what you make, sharing with them to eat. That's the easy way to do it. Or maybe you're just watching YouTube baking stuff together, right? Most kids love to watch YouTube clips. So definitely it's not about your child, only your child. It's also about sharing with them what you're interested in as a person. So I say that you need to do it in an inviting way, because if you force it, then it's not going to develop as a shared special interest, right? Doing nothing is meaningful. That's an important one. So if you are in a place right now where your autistic or neurodivergent family member doesn't want to have anything to do with you in a joint activity, then I think you need to take a step back and really let go. And meaning that you have to practice mindful communication. So if you tend to use a lot of instructions or closed-ended questions, that's a form of static communication. It puts that person on the spot if that's the only communication mode that you have. Who wants to join an activity if you just feel the tension to begin with, and if all you hear is instructions coming from the other person? You're not being inviting, you're being instructional, and that's really no fun, right? You need to learn to slow down the process and also choose the right kind of time to initiate your shared interests with a neurodivergent loved one. So timing is everything. Good timing means it's good for you. When you can focus and not worry about work or thinking about work or answering your phone and so on. Yeah, so timing is important for you as well as for your family member, right? And learn to slow down the process. Learn to be thoughtful before saying anything. And this is really important. We want our children to develop thoughtfulness. And I think that process needs to start from us. Instead of just say, or do. We need to be able to learn to model thoughtfulness. And it could be as simple as, just saying that, like, something smells good, right? You're being thoughtful and inviting at the same time. Can a minimally speaking person connect and engage and own a business or volunteer in the community? Absolutely, but I think the first step is to help that person understand that I can be myself with the best that I can do and all of my good enoughs to be able to participate the best that I can. For that person to know that I have the potential to be guided by someone else who has more experience than me. And that's, in this case, of course, this is a parent. It could be a teacher. It could be a coach or a mentor at work. It could be anyone. But the first step that we have to unlock is for our neurodivergent family member to have that open mind to know that they feel accepted and they feel empowered to be themselves. That's the first step. And how do we start that? Is to do this kind of connections and opportunities and hanging out at home as much as we can. Remember, your autistic child has worked very, very hard all their lives. So home should be a safe zone and full of acceptance, unconditional love and acceptance, where they can be themselves, right? So that's an important message that I want to give all of the adult guides here. And, if you have the opportunity to be present for someone, like, just stop the doing part. Just be present and be intentional, because that's really the first step to allow neurodivergent young people to know I have the potential to be guided by other people. And my way and my knowledge and my abilities are great. And it serves a function as well for other people, right? It goes both ways. So this is my last slide. So I do a few times a year. It's usually quarterly. I run small group close online classes where I group usually 10 families at a time, and I group them based on a particular topic. So I just wanted to share with you all some of the topics for 2022. I will be teaching a 4-class series on authentic autistic play, special interest as a career foundation, diving deep into this, learning styles. It's really important. Learning styles, self-advocacy in the real world, and IEP prep. It's all kind of connected together. Nurturing workflow and productivity at home. As a neurodivergent, I don't fit into a standard 9 to 5 schedule. I call it more, what we need to develop is life work integration. That daily workflow is different because the self-regulation reset needs to be part of it. And for every person and family looks a little bit different. So that's a favorite class of mine. Mindful decision makings or executive functioning skills. That's another big topic that I love to deconstruct and explore with families. And lastly, navigating family and peer relationships. So that is my last slide. If you have any questions, this is my email. If you want to donate to Autistic Career Pathways, we work very hard to have autistic mentors be able to guide other autistic mentors. So, learn from people who have similar lived experiences. So we're building a platform to house video training resources for businesses. So if you want to donate, you can go to check out our website as well. Okay. And that brings me to the end of the presentations. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you.